This morning you got into the car, pressed the gas pedal and went 60 kilometers per hour without expending 1 gram of effort. That trip 100,000 years ago took 2 days of walking through land that could kill you at any step. Now let us go even further back. Imagine you are standing on a beach 65,000 years ago, with no shoes, no map, nothing in your hands except what you could carry on your back. Ahead is water. Water stretching all the way to the horizon, with no shore on the other side, no sign that there is anything over there. No one who has ever returned to tell the tale. Behind your back is everything keeping you alive. The campfire, your relatives, the hunting path you know every bend of, the water source you have drunk from since you were little. Everything familiar, safe, guaranteeing that you will wake up the next morning. Yet they left it all behind. They stepped into the water. Think seriously about this for a moment. There is no rational reason to go. Not one reason. Staying is safer. Staying has more food. Staying has people to protect you. Going is the stupidest choice a living creature focused on survival could make. Yet humans went. Again and again and again, over tens of thousands of years, through deserts and high mountains and oceans, to lands with no names, with no way back. And the question is not where they went. The question is what made them do it. The answer goes deeper than you think. Let us begin. Begin with something that sounds obvious, but in fact no one thinks about. Humans 65,000 years ago were exactly like you. Not similar. Exactly the same. The same brain, the same body, the same biological limits. Not stronger, not smarter. No claws, no fangs, no faster running than prey. No better vision than predators. On paper, they were a creature so ordinary it was pitiful, standing in the middle of a planet full of things that could kill them in a few seconds. Yet they left Africa, crossed deserts, climbed mountains, sailed oceans, and took over the entire planet in a few tens of thousands of years. No animal in the history of Earth has done that. So what did they have? They had feet. Not the fastest, not the strongest, but the most enduring that evolution has ever created. The arch of the foot works like a spring. The Achilles tendon stores and releases energy with every step. 2 million sweat glands cool continuously while every other large animal has to stop because of overheating. A cheetah reaches 110 kilometers per hour but is exhausted after a few tens of seconds. Humans walk 30 kilometers a day, sleep, wake up, and do it again. The next day, the next week, the next month. No animal can do that. In 1978, Mary Leakey discovered footprints at Laetoli, Tanzania, pressed into volcanic ash from 3.6 million years ago. 2 individuals walked upright side by side, with clear, purposeful steps, and those footprints look almost identical to your footprints. This was the only transportation technology humans had for millions of years, and it was enough to take us farther than any species that has ever existed. But feet do not explain why they used them to go. The old territory had everything: known water sources, familiar hunting paths, known dangers they knew how to deal with, a community that protected each other. Staying was the rational choice by every survival criterion. The new land had none of that. Unknown terrain, unknown animals, unknown climate, no one to save you if things went wrong. Yet archaeologists find obsidian stone tools from a volcanic region appearing hundreds of kilometers away. Seashells from the sea found deep inland. Amber from the Baltic traded across the entire Alps range. These people knew what was on the other side because someone had gone before and told the tale. This was not wandering. This was a network connected by feet, spreading across lands with no names. On paper, staying was correct. Going was wrong, but humans chose to go. Again and again and again, over thousands of generations. So this is no longer a question of geography or resources. This is a question about something inside, something that was written into us before we knew how to name anything. While archaeologists dig up fossils and climatologists analyze ice cores to find the answer to why humans migrated, a group of geneticists began searching where no one expected, inside the genome of people living today, and they found something no one was mentally prepared to face. Not in fossil bones, not in million-year-old sediment layers, in the blood of the person sitting reading the scientific paper about themselves. What they found is called DRD47R, a variant of the gene controlling the dopamine D4 receptor, appearing in about 20% of the global population. Not a rare gene, not a pathological mutation. A normal variant found in 1 in 5 people, with consequences that are not normal at all. Dopamine is the brain's satisfaction signal, released when you eat something delicious, when you complete something, when you reach where you want to go. In normal people, that signal is strong enough for the brain to say, all right, okay, we can stop here. In people carrying 7R, the D4 receptor is less sensitive to dopamine. The brain receives less satisfaction signal from the same stimulus. The result is the brain constantly seeks the new, has a higher risk tolerance threshold, and has chronic restlessness with what is familiar. Science calls this novelty-seeking. Normal people call this inability to sit still. In 1999, Chuan-Sheng Chen and colleagues at UC Irvine analyzed DRD4 data from 2,320 people from 39 populations worldwide, compared with the prehistory migration history of each group. The correlation coefficient between long-distance migration and the frequency of the 7R allele is 0.85, with p less than 0.001. In human behavioral statistics, 0.85 is a number that almost never appears. Populations that migrated farther carry this gene more, not a little, but significantly more and consistently worldwide. From Africa to Asia to the Americas, the farther they went, the more 7R they carried. And this is the part that makes everything stranger. The 7R allele is younger than the common 4R allele by 5 to 10 times. Not a primitive state, it is a new mutation, appearing and strongly selected right around 40,000 to 50,000 years ago, exactly matching the largest migration wave in human history. The migration did not just select people carrying this gene. The migration may have created pressure that caused this gene to spread. People carrying 7R went farther, survived better in new environments, reproduced more, and passed the gene on. In 2008, Dan Eisenberg at Northwestern University studied the Ariel people in Kenya. 65 people still living nomadically, and 87 people from the same community who had settled 30 years earlier. Same genetic background, two completely different environments. Result: nomadic people carrying 7R had better nutrition and physical condition indices. Settled people carrying 7R had lower indices compared to settled people without the gene. Same gene, different environments, completely reversed results. This gene is not good or bad in an absolute sense. It is good when you are moving and bad when you are forced to stand still. As if the body of people carrying 7R rejects the settled environment at a biological level, not psychological. This gene is not a disorder, not a system error. In the first hundreds of thousands of years of human history, when the world kept changing and moving, was a survival condition rather than a choice. This was the evolutionary reward for those willing to go when others stayed. And 20% of the people reading these lines are carrying it in them right now. But let us pause here for a moment, because up to now we have been talking about migration as if it was a choice, as if ancestors looked at the horizon, saw opportunity, and decided to go because they had an adventure gene in them. We often romanticize them that way, as if leaving was the privilege of the brave, those strong enough to leave everything behind and step into the unknown. The truth is much harsher. In 2017, researcher Jessica Tierney and colleagues published an analysis of seabed sediment cores from the western Gulf of Aden, tracing the climate of the Horn of Africa region back 200,000 years. The results show that around 70,000 years ago, this area suddenly shifted from a wet period that scientists call the Green Sahara to extreme drought, colder than the current level. Not gradually, suddenly. Tierney concluded directly, the data show that the large migration wave occurred right after this environmental change. Perhaps people left not because they wanted to, because the environment was deteriorating and there was no other choice. Imagine that specifically. Water sources shrinking each season, lakes turning into mud puddles then disappearing completely. Prey animals move with the water, pulling the entire food chain. Human communities begin competing for the shrinking resources, this season less than last, this year less than last. The land can no longer feed enough people. This was not a decision to go explore. This was a decision not to die here. In 2024, Frederick Saltré and colleagues at Flinders University published a study in Nature Communications combining archaeological, genetic, and paleoclimate data to identify the actual migration corridors that ancient people took. The discovery is clear to the point of being almost cruel. These people did not go straight, did not climb mountains when they could avoid it, did not enter deserts when there was another choice. They followed rivers. Through the driest regions of northern Europe, archaeological traces show they followed the Dnieper River corridor, not because it was a beautiful road, but because it was the only road that still had water. They were not exploring. They were running after the only thing that could keep them alive one more day. And they did it at a speed of 4 kilometers per hour, maximum 30 kilometers each day, entirely by foot. No maps, no weather forecasts. No one to tell them whether the corridor ahead was still open or closed, still had water or dried up, still safe or already occupied by others. Every morning waking up was a new decision, continue or turn back, and there is no correct answer. Only the answer of still surviving and the answer where no one is left to tell the tale. The courage of ancestors was not fearlessness, it was choosing the unknown when the known was killing them day by day, season by season, generation by generation. That was not heroism. That was people who had no better choice. But worsening climate was not the biggest reason. There was something much worse that happened before that, much farther back in time, something that almost completely wiped out the human species before the Great Migration could even begin. We often think of humans as an unstoppable force, always crowded, always spreading, always dominating any environment we set foot in. That is the story we tell about ourselves. But it was not so. There was a time when the number of our ancestors was fewer than the number of students in an average elementary school, and it stayed that way for more than 100,000 years continuously. On the 31st of August 2023, the journal Science published a study that the paleoanthropology community calls a methodological breakthrough. Yixuan Pan at East China Normal University and colleagues developed a computational tool called FitCol, analyzing site frequency spectra in the genomes of 3,154 people from 10 African populations and 40 non-African populations. Result: the ancestral human population decreased from about 98,130 breeding individuals down to 1,280 and stayed at that level from 930,000 to 813,000 years ago. That is 117,000 years continuously. Let us pause at that number. 98.7% of humans disappeared, not in one quick disaster. Over more than 100,000 years gradually. Generation after generation, each generation fewer people, fewer children surviving, fewer choices. Traces of that period still remain in your DNA right now, narrowing genetic diversity to the point that scientists reading the genomes of living humans today can see that our ancestors were once almost gone. The cause coincides with the transition from early to middle Pleistocene. Ice age cycles changed from short to longer and more severe. Ocean temperatures dropped. Widespread prolonged droughts across Africa and Eurasia. Continental scale collapse of animal systems. The environment did not worsen gradually so humans could adapt. It changed faster than the recovery capacity of small populations trying to survive. This explains a long-standing mystery in paleoanthropology. Scientists have long wondered why the human fossil record in this period is almost empty in both Africa and Eurasia. Giorgio Manzi at Sapienza University Rome said directly, "That gap matches exactly in time with this bottleneck. We once thought we did not find bones because of poor preservation conditions. Now we know the answer is harsher, because there was almost no one left to leave bones." And this is the question that Yixuan Pan himself posed after publishing the results. Did the terrible selective pressure during those 117,000 years accelerate the evolution of the human brain? Did that period standing on the brink of extinction itself create the risk-taking, flexible, never-sit-still instincts we see in humans later? When there were only 1,280 people left, and every decision was life or death, were the people willing to move, willing to try the new, willing to go into the unknown the only ones left? That question does not yet have an answer, but it is very hard to dismiss. You exist because your ancestors were the 1.3% that remained, not by chance. They were the ones who moved when everything collapsed, and they passed on to you not only life, but also the instinct that kept them alive. But not all migrations were running away. There was one journey that cannot be explained by desperation, not running from climate, not running after water, not because staying meant death. It can only be explained by something completely different. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans walked through every terrain Earth could create. Deserts that burned flesh, high mountains where the air was thin, frozen steppes stretching to the horizon. Feet took them through all of it, but water stopped them. Rivers were walls. Seas were absolute limits. And then at some point, someone looked at a piece of floating wood, held onto it, and did not drown. That was the breakthrough. Not designed, discovered. In 2003, archaeologists working on Flores Island, Indonesia, found stone tools 800,000 years old. The problem is, Flores was never connected to the mainland. Even at the lowest sea levels during ice ages, there was still at least 20 kilometers of open water separating this island from the nearest shore. Rotten wood long gone. Bamboo decomposed thousands of years earlier. Whatever they used to cross has disappeared completely without leaving a trace. But the tools are still there, and tools means someone crossed. But that was not the most astonishing journey. 65,000 years ago, a group of people in Southeast Asia stood looking out to sea. Even at the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age, the minimum distance from where they stood to Australia was still 70 kilometers of open water. No shore visible on the other side, no way to know what was there. No one had ever returned to tell. Scientists ran ocean current models to check if this could have been an accident. The result is clear. The probability of random drifting to Australia is extremely low at any time of year. But an active journey following summer monsoon winds could succeed in 4 to 7 days. Not an accident. Someone had observed long enough to know when the wind blew in the right direction and when to go. And genomic evidence from native Australians shows the first settling group had more than 72 to 100 people. It cannot be random drifting with that number. There must have been organization. There must have been preparation. There must have been enough people agreeing to step onto the boat that morning and not look back. The oldest boat humans have found is the Pessie dugout canoe in the Netherlands, 10,000 years old, just a hollowed log. But people lived on islands unreachable by land tens of thousands of years before that boat was carved. The technology existed far before physical evidence because organic materials do not survive tens of thousands of years. The only remaining sign is that humans reached places unreachable by foot. This was not people running away. This was people looking out at 70 kilometers of bottomless water, not knowing what was on the other side, and deciding to build a boat, wait for the right monsoon season, and paddle away. They left the mainland with nothing but accumulated observation, experience passed from person to person, and the belief that there was something on the other side even if no one could see it. Science calls that ability cognitive modernity, the capacity to plan for a future that cannot be seen. You inherited that. We have talked about those who went, those who crossed the sea to Australia, those who followed the Dinapa River through arid regions, those who survived the 117,000-year bottleneck. Now let us talk about those who stayed, and what happened to them. Migration corridors were not always open. Research by Saltre and colleagues, along with data from many other groups, shows these corridors worked like windows, opening during short favorable climate periods when temperatures rose enough for ice to retreat, rainfall enough for vegetation to grow along the route, water sources enough to feed a group on the move, then closing when conditions changed, quickly or slowly, but without warning. Groups that did not move while the window was open, when it closed, they not only lost the opportunity, they were trapped in an environment that was gradually shrinking, gradually drier, gradually colder, gradually no longer enough to support the number of people they had. And what happened next was not just the death of those individuals. It was the complete stop of the entire gene line they carried. Think about that in pure genetic terms. When a person dies without children, nothing of theirs is passed on, not just genes, but also what those genes create, behavioral tendencies, ways of reacting to stress, risk tolerance thresholds, ability to adapt to new environments. All of it stops there. Meanwhile, those who went, whether they reached the destination or not, whether they succeeded or failed at the destination, had the chance to reproduce in the new environment. Children born in the new land carried the genes of parents who chose to move. Over enough generations, the human population was no longer a random population. It became a population filtered through tens of thousands of years of continuous selection, favoring those willing to leave when conditions changed. And that selection principle was not the strongest survive, not the smartest. The strongest animals in a stable environment become helpless in a disrupted environment because they are optimized for a specific condition that no longer exists. What survives is the most flexible. People who follow water when water shifts. People who climb higher when lowlands flood. People who build boats when the shoreline disappears. No strategy is correct forever in a changing world. Only the ability to change strategy when the world changes, and change fast enough not to be left behind the closing door. Natural selection does not reward stability. It rewards the ability to endure instability. People with the instinct not to sit still do not seek risk because they like risk. They endure change better than others, recover faster when the environment is disrupted, find an escape earlier when the old path closes, and in a world continuously collapsing and reborn over hundreds of thousands of years, that was the only thing that mattered. Let us be honest about this, because the story will not be honest if it only tells the success part. Not all who went reached their destination. Not all migrations ended with a new land and surviving descendants. Many groups left before the main migration 65,000 years ago, went far, went in the right direction, and disappeared completely. Archaeologists find evidence of modern humans at Skul and Kofsa in Israel, dated from 100,000 to 120,000 years ago. Traces found in Saudi Arabia, even in southern China before the Great Migration. These groups went. They reached distant lands, and then the climate changed, corridors closed, the environment was no longer enough to sustain small populations trying to hold on in strange lands. They disappeared completely, leaving not one gene in people living today. No one remembers them because there is no one left to remember. And then there was something even worse. 74,000 years ago, the Toba volcano in Sumatra, Indonesia, erupted in the largest explosion Earth has witnessed in 2.5 million years. The volcanic winter lasted up to 6 years. Global temperatures dropped on average 3 to 4 degrees Celsius in many areas. Rainfall decreased 40% in places like Northeast Asia and the Himalayas. The already thin global population dropped below 10,000 people. Many groups on the migration path, moving in the right direction with completely rational decisions, were wiped out midway. Not because they were wrong, because the Earth was exploding under their feet, and there was no way to know or avoid it in advance. That is the pattern of all these failures. Not lack of courage, not lack of correct instinct, not wrong decisions. It was wrong timing, wrong corridor, or an unpredictable disaster striking right when they were moving and with no place to hide. Those who failed were not wrong to go, they were just not lucky enough. The right decision and the right outcome are two different things, and the gap between them is sometimes a volcano on the other side of the planet that you do not know exists. Evolution does not care about fairness, it only cares about who is left. This is the part most people do not think about. We often talk about migration as something that happened, the past, history, fossils and carbon dating and numbers tens of thousands of years ago, as if it is the story of others, at another time, unrelated to you sitting reading these lines. It is not. DRD47R did not disappear after humans settled. Genes have no concept of time or history. It does not know that now there are houses, supermarkets, paved roads leading everywhere. It is still doing exactly what it has done from 50,000 years ago. Lowering the satisfaction threshold with what is already there, creating chronic restlessness with familiar environments, continuously whispering that there is something better on the other side. In the modern world, it does not lead you to the beach with a self-built boat, but it is there, and you have felt it. You sit in a traffic jam and get irritated for no clear reason, not because you are late, but because something deeper cannot stand standing still. You look at a photo of a strange city and feel something pulling you toward it even though you have never been. You read about a distant land and cannot explain why your heart beats faster. That is not social media. That is not FOMO. That is a 50,000-year-old signal running on modern hardware, searching for a beach that is no longer there but still refusing to turn off. The clearest evidence lies in the Americas. Those who crossed the Bering Strait were the group that migrated farthest from the original starting point in Africa, crossing all of Eurasia, through Siberia, through Alaska, down to South America. They carry the highest DRD47R ratio in the world. The frequency of this gene increases gradually with migration distance, as if evolution is recording the journey in the very genetic code of humans, marking each leg with the concentration of the instinct not to sit still. And 3,000 years ago, the Polynesians proved that gene was not yet tired. Not out of desperation, not forced by climate, not because the environment collapsed. They crossed the Pacific on double-hulled boats, reading ocean wave directions, cloud colors near land, bird flight paths, no compass, no map, to Hawaii, Easter Island, New Zealand. Some journeys more than 4,000 kilometers of open water with nothing in between. This is not new evidence of cognitive modernity. This is evidence that 3,000 years ago, that gene was still doing exactly what it had done from 65,000 years ago, from 930,000 years ago, from whenever the first selective pressure first engraved it into the human code. One species, one gene, one decision repeated over tens of thousands of years, spreading across the planet and rewriting the entire history of the human species. And it has not stopped. So let us return to that beach one more time. The same beach, 65,000 years ago, the same person standing looking out at 70 kilometers of bottomless water, with nothing on the other side that the naked eye could see. But now we know who that person was, not a character in legend. Not a hero in the romantic sense we often assign to those who have been dead long enough to become symbols. That was a survivor from the 1.3% remaining after 117,000 years of bottleneck, a person carrying in them a dopamine receptor less sensitive than others, and therefore never feeling enough with what they had. A person who had lost everything familiar because the climate took it away season by season and had no better choice than to look forward. Everything in their biology, in their circumstances, in the instincts accumulated through hundreds of thousands of years of selective pressure converged at that exact moment and said, "Step across." They did not know what they were doing to history. They were only doing the only thing everything in them knew how to do. The next time you feel restless for no reason, when you look out the window and see the horizon pulling you toward it, when you want to change something you cannot explain why, that is not a weakness, that is not instability. That is something older than any civilization that has ever existed, running in you exactly the way it ran in the person standing on that beach. Those who stayed left no descendants. You are here because your ancestors stood on that beach and chose to step across. The question is not why they left. The question is, are you hearing that call? If you are the person who read all the way to here without stopping midway, there is a high chance you are carrying DRD47R, and this channel was made for exactly people like that. Subscribe so you do not miss the next time we dig deeper into the things that shaped the human species before the human species knew what it was.